I'm Marlis Arnold.
And I'm Alan Arnold.
And we are Adventures with Tea. We were so excited when Mid-Continent Public Library asked us to teach this class, Cooking with Tea, because we've been cooking with tea for over 20 years.
Yeah, we've been doing it for a long time and have created hundreds of recipes.
Yes. And even though it's fairly new, a new concept here in the United States, in Asia, they've been cooking with tea for centuries. And so it's just now finally starting to get some traction with some top chefs and high-end restaurants that are incorporating it. But we're going to show you some quick and easy recipes that you can make at home that aren't all fancy,
quick, simple, basic recipes.
So we're going to go through a number of different recipes today, and we're going to share several different techniques with you. So here we go. First technique is simply substitute tea for water. Can't get any simpler than that. So for example, cooking your morning oatmeal, rice, pasta, anything that you would normally use water, just brew your favorite tea. So like your morning oatmeal could be a fruit tea, or, your rice could be maybe a green tea, or, again, a kind of a fruit flavored tea. Get as creative as you want. But you can also use it to make a cake. Because if you think about it, you buy a box cake mix at the store. What does it call for?
Oil, egg, and water.
So exactly, you just substitute whatever your favorite tea is. This time of year, chai is really great to use for a cake.
Yeah.
So we've done a number of different flavors over the years, but that's a very fun thing to do. The next example is a tea and vinegar pie crust. Now, you're probably thinking vinegar in a pie crust.
Yeah.
But it actually is really good. It helps with the texture and the flakiness of the pie crust. It also, because we use a balsamic vinegar, so it adds a little to the flavor as well. So for this one, we use vanilla spice chai tea in the crust, along with a cranberry pear balsamic vinegar. And then one thing you'll notice with several of the recipes we're going to share today is that we do what's called layering. So there's tea in the pie crust, but there's also tea in the pie filling as well, in the cranberry and apple filling as well. So it really adds to the whole experience. And I also want to point out that you'll notice on a lot of these pictures, you'll see a little leaf code down below and maybe a number. Wherever you see the leaf, that means that recipe is on our website at adventureswithtea.com, so you can go look that up. And if you see a number, that means it was in that issue of our e-magazine.
Right. Now this next method is, Marlis mentioned you could cook rice or oatmeal. Well, this time, let's use an apricot black tea, and let's cook quinoa. So I made meatballs, and instead of crackers or bread or oats as the binder in it or filler, I used the quinoa. So I make my meatballs, let those bake, and you'll notice I reconstituted some dried apricots in that same hot tea, and then ground them in a blender with some more of that tea and use that as the sauce on those quinoa meatballs.
So again, back to that idea of layering the flavor in more than one way.
And this one uses the tea just a little bit differently. I use a nice heavy smoky tea. You can find a Lapsang Souchong. It's a black tea that's been cured over smoking pine needles and pine wood. So it kind of has the smell of a campfire.
Yeah.
So brew your tea like you normally would, strain it, but now let it cool. And as it approaches that 110, not quite down to 100, add your yeast to it to start activating it. All the while you've been roasting some Roma tomatoes, and now you're going to blend the tomatoes, take that yeast, mix it together with the other ingredients, and you're going to have a tomato basil bread that is going to make nice, hearty, fantastic sandwiches.
Yeah, it really does make great sandwiches.
So now we're going to use the liquid tea as a stock. So instead of vegetable, beef, chicken stock, brew your tea and use that as the stock itself. Now, I know that green tea works and a nice hearty, heartier, heavier tea would work. But I know it really, truly works because I had a gal come up to me after a class and say, I'd love to try this, but my husband wouldn't eat it. Yeah. So I asked her, are you going to make soup anytime soon? Yes. Well, just before it comes to a boil, it starts to simmer just a little, add 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bags of green tea. She says, I have green tea. I said, put it in, let it steep, 3 to 5, pull it out, finish your soup like you normally would, and you don't have to tell him. Well, she found me a few weeks later and reported back that she did it, he loved it, and now she incorporates it in her soups as well.
And he didn't know.
And he didn't know at first.
Yeah, maybe she told him. I don't know. But all right, so for our pumpkin squash soup, this one is a cream soup. This is really one of our go-to favorites every fall and winter. We make this a lot. It's a popular one also when we have guests over. But so this one we use grandma's pumpkin pie tea as the base, and you use it to cook the butternut squash chunks, cubes in it. And so then you cook those down till they start to get soft, and then you use one of my favorite tools ever in the kitchen, the immersion blender, or what we call the stick blender. Yeah. And so you can just take this and you just put it down in the mixture and you just blend it right there in the pan. No muss, no fuss. And then you add some whipping cream to it to give it that nice creamy texture. And then you can see from the picture that one of the keys here is the toppings. We love to use crumbled bacon, shredded Asiago, and then some chopped green onion on there to really top it off. But it's a wonderful, wonderful comfort food.
It is good.
Our next soup is egg drop soup. And for this one, we were at a Chinese restaurant and we were eating some egg drop soup, which if you've ever had it in a restaurant, it's usually really bright yellow and often highly salty. But we were just sitting there and it was like, I wonder if we could do this one with green tea as the soup base. So we tried it. And what works really well for this is green tea. We actually like to use, we have a green tea from Nepal called Kanchenjunga Verde. And the reason it's named that is because it's grown near Mount Kanchenjunga in Nepal. But so we use that as the base, and then we add a little bit of salt and a little bit of soy sauce. So you'll notice in the picture that it looks a little different than what you see in the restaurant because it's got a more of a brown cast, but that's because of the tea and the soy. Right. But then, so you use that and then you stir the egg in, and you'll also notice in the picture that it's, maybe doesn't look like the restaurant kind because it all depends on how fast or slow and how you're stirring the egg in.
This one has small strands. You may get long ones.
Yeah, so it'll look different every time you make it. Yeah. So, but it just tastes wonderful, and it's so much healthier than the high.
Again, you control the ingredients, so you can put as much or as little salt as you want. Which leads us to the next one. If you took a green tea with walnuts and used that as the base, and used a jicama. Now, for you who may not know what a jicama is, it kind of looks like an oversized turnip. But it's not. Some people call it a Mexican potato. It does have a nice thick skin, so you have to take a knife and be very careful.
Well, it's kind of like a cross between a pear and a potato. Yeah. It's like a little bit sweet, kind of.
A little bit.
But it's more crunchy, like a raw
and that's
potato.
why we have it in this soup. You'll peel it, dice it, and then you put it in the soup in the stock pan and you'll cook it for just a little bit. And then you'll notice you add some spinach and let that wilt. And then just before you pull it off, you're going to stir in some regular yogurt and some diced mushrooms. So in this soup, the mushrooms aren't cooked. They're there for the heartiness and the filling because even though it's a nice broth-based soup, it's filling.
So you'll start to notice in some of these recipes that it's very specific what tea we choose to pair with it. So like this one, we use a green tea with walnuts in it, and then there's walnuts in the soup as well. So it's that pairing. Sometimes there's flavors that are, or sometimes there's recipes that you could use any kind of flavors. Like when I mentioned doing the cake mix, you could pick whatever flavor you wanted. So it just kind of depends on the recipe which one is the most important, or if there is any kind of specific
and then just experiment with it. Sometimes you'll find something that doesn't work, and that's okay, because then you won't do it again.
Yeah, exactly. And we've done some of that, trust me.
We have.
All right, our next technique is probably the one we use the most, and that's called cold infusion. Now, if you've never done a cold infusing, basically what that means is you take whatever liquid. Usually we do it oftentimes with some kind of milk. You can also do juice, you can do vinegar, a lot of different kinds of liquids, but you infuse the loose tea into the liquid. So you put it in there, you put it, so like for example, let's say whipping cream. So, because that's real easy, you put open a carton of whipping cream, throw some loose tea in, close it up, shake it a little bit, put it in the fridge, leave it overnight. It's not going to hurt anything. It's not going to oversteep, but you leave it in there overnight, and then the next day you use this handy little strainer and you pour the milk through the strainer to strain out the loose tea, and then you've got your flavored milk or flavored juice, whatever you've done, and you can use that in your recipe. So our first example here is one of our favorites, tea infused ice cream. Now this is one you can use just about any flavor you can imagine. But you see we've got two different options in the picture. The first one is our chai ice cream. Now, when we were starting out and experimenting with this, we didn't have an ice cream freezer yet. And so one of our friends knew what we were doing, and she calls us and says, "Oh, I just got a new ice cream freezer. Why don't you come over and we'll experiment?"
Yes, we will.
So we took her up on that. We raced right over. But anyway, so we get there and her husband's like, "Well, I don't do homemade ice cream." And, but he was polite. He said he would try it. Well, the next thing we knew, he went back for seconds.
Yes, he did.
And so we knew we had a hit. So that's the chai ice cream. Then the other recipe you see is called peach and blue, because for this one we used a peach oolong and infused that into the milk. And again, we have the ice cream recipe on our website, but you can do whatever your favorite ice cream recipe is. But anyway, we infused the milk with peach oolong, and then just before the freezer, it gets solid in the freezer, you put in some peach chunks, and then also either fresh or frozen blueberries.
Right.
So that's the name, peach and blue.
That is really good.
Yeah. And then our next recipe also uses infused milk, this time heavy whipping cream. We make homemade praline. And we first came up with this for our Mardi Gras class, and it was a huge hit. It's always a hit. Every time we do an in-person class and we have pralines, people are coming back for seconds.
Yeah, it is.
But it's really, making candy is not that hard. It's just tricky as far as timing and temperature, but it's not that difficult of a recipe, honestly. But anyway, this one is a lot of fun, and you'll see it is on our website, so you can go check that out.
Now, something I like to do is make tea-infused pudding. So you're going to take your milk and you're going to put, in this case, Grandma's pumpkin pie. Remember earlier we used it as a soup, but now you're seeing the same flavor can be used not only as a savory, but also a sweet, as a dessert. So we're going to brew our milk, or steep our milk overnight, and then the next day, as Marla showed with the strainer, strain it out, and now you have a pumpkin flavored milk. But now you have a choice. You can make pudding the easy way, like Marlis does, with a
boxed vanilla pudding mix.
And it works just fine.
Yeah, because you've got the flavored milk and the pudding mix, and you're good to go.
That's right. I like to do the old-fashioned way on the stove from scratch, but either way, you're going to make a tea-infused pudding. And I have to say, it's really good. You may not buy many boxed ones after this. But now you're going to layer it. That white layer you see is cream cheese and whipping cream.
Well, whipped cream.
Or whipped cream.
Yeah. Whipping cream that's been whipped.
Yeah. So now you're going to layer it. Some cream cheese mix, some pudding, some nuts. Cream cheese, pudding, nuts. We used pecans, but you could use walnuts or whatever nuts you have laying around. And it just makes a really nice individual serving to be served after dinner. And this one, we call our adult mac and cheese. Do you remember earlier I mentioned in the bread the smoky black tea? Well, now you're going to take the smoky black tea and you're going to steep it in your milk like we talked about earlier. This time you're going to strain it and you're going to use it in your roux to add your cheese. We like to use Gruyere and Havarti. So you'll melt that and then you'll stir in your pasta, and you'll see that we like to actually add just a little pinch of panko crumbs on top at the end, just before you serve it, for that little bit of crunch. So smoky and hearty.
It's a grown-up mac and cheese.
Yeah.
And cookies. We wanted to make cookies, but if you think about a cookie recipe, there's usually not a lot of liquid in it.
Right.
Sometimes like really none. It's just like eggs or melted butter.
Yeah.
So we came up with a bar cookie recipe that we've used and adapted in a lot of different variations. For this one, our white chocolate cranberry blondies, we use our holiday gingerbread tea, and then we infuse that into the evaporated milk, so the canned milk, and then you mix that just with a white cake mix. So you put that together, make your cookie, add in your white chocolate chips and your dried cranberries, make the bars, and then when the bars are cool, then you frost it with a cream cheese frosting. Oh.
And you can cut them smaller so you can have two and not feel bad.
Because they're highly addictive.
They are.
Okay, our next technique is blended. And so, I mentioned earlier about the stick blender and how much we love to use that. You don't have to necessarily have one of those. You can also use, if you have just the regular blender, where you just put the ingredients in, hit the button, that works as well. But our first recipe here is our Fiesta Gazpacho. And, I talked about the Grandma's Pumpkin Pie, the pumpkin squash soup being our winter go-to soup. Fiesta Gazpacho is our summertime favorite soup. This one is, and it's so easy. I mean, like the only complicated thing is you got to chop all the vegetables.
Yeah, it takes more time to chop it than it is to actually make it.
But it's like you chop up all the vegetables. So you've got tomatoes and cucumber and tomatillas and red onion and garlic and cilantro if you're a pro cilantro
if you like
person.
it.
If not, you can leave it out. You could just top it, use it on top as a garnish like you see in the picture. And then we use our October Nights tea, which again has some of that smoky black tea in there. It's also got cinnamon and spices and peppercorns. So it's got a lot of different flavors going on anyway. We put that in there, put in all those vegetables, hit the button, and you're done in about 30 seconds.
Kids love to help with that one.
Yeah. But anyway, so you get it all blended up, and then it's actually best if you can put it in the fridge for like an hour or two at least, or you could even make it the day before.
Right, it's really good to set overnight for the next day.
Now you'll have to stir it if you let it set for a long period of time, but it's just a really good, really hearty, flavorful soup.
So what would happen if you took a green tea with blueberries, 3 tablespoons of sugar, so not real sweet, and some cantaloupe? Well, let's blend it and make sickles. Pops. Pops. We'll make pops. So you can see we happen to use a Zoku maker, which is that shape, because it freezes fairly quickly and things stay separated in this example. Because if you let it set, the cantaloupe is actually light and it'll float. So I just had to stir it before I made the next round. We've not done the in the freezer method. I'm guessing it might freeze just slow enough that it might separate.
Yeah,
but actually in this case, it wouldn't be a bad thing because then you'd have a 2-tone sickle pop. And it would be a green tea, sweet green tea, and then it would be cantaloupe.
Yeah. Can't go wrong either way.
Either way would be good.
Our next example is a dip, and so we made roasted beet hummus. And so if you've never made hummus, it uses tahini. So we made a tea-infused homemade tahini. We used our Walk in the Woods green tea again, the one with the walnuts in it. So we use that with the sesame seeds and oil to make the tahini, and then combine that with the roasted beets and some garlic and some dill. And then you just blend it all up and you've got your roasted beet hummus. And then you'll notice again, we talk about the repeating the flavors. So then we crumbled some walnuts and some feta on top to go along with that whole walnut taste in the green tea.
Yeah. Now the next technique is grind your tea as a spice. One footnote is read your label. If it's just tea or just spices or things, then you're fine. If it has an ingredient in it you're not sure about if you should actually consume, then I would say let's not grind it. But it's just that simple. You'll choose your tea and use a coffee grinder like this. This coffee grinder has never ground coffee. No. Only tea and spices.
Well, and you probably wouldn't want to use a grinder that had ground coffee because it would have those coffee
probably
oils
not. It
in
might
it
have just a little bit. So again,
change
grind
the flavor
it,
a little.
and now you store it in a jar if you have it, in a Ziploc. If you happen to grind a real strong tea, a Ziploc smell may come through, so you may have to double bag it.
Yeah, like that smoky tea we talked about, you definitely need to double bag that one.
Yeah.
So our first example here is our crab stuffed tomatoes. And this uses, again, the same thing we used in the Fiesta Gazpacho, the October nights with all the different flavors. So this time we grind it as a spice and mix it with our crab and onion and mayo and lemon juice and shredded cheese. Stir it all up and then stir in a little bit of panko again right before serving, and then you just stuff those beautiful tomatoes. And
yeah, those leftover tomatoes that you didn't blend in the gazpacho.
Yeah, exactly.
I like to take that smoky tea and blend it or grind it, and now you have a smoky powder to add to almost any dish. I don't know what's in liquid smoke, but I know what's in this. It's just the tea and the smoke. So in this particular recipe, I made my chili and I stirred it right in as one of the spices and then let it cook through. And then of course on this one, we like to put just a little dollop of sour cream and shredded cheese. I will tell you though that this summer we submitted this recipe for a virtual state fair.
Yeah.
And
we got best in show.
We did.
It was
Sent
fun.
us a little blue ribbon and everything.
Yeah, yeah. And some of the comments they made was obviously smoky. They also said it was slightly sweet. And then the word that kept coming up was briskety, which was kind of fun. Yeah. So anyway,
it was exciting.
It's definitely a fun twist on the traditional chili. All right, so we've given you a lot of different ideas. We promised everything from main dishes to desserts, and we've covered all of that, but now we want to give you some beverage ideas as well. And this is beyond just brewing your tea. So our first one, this goes back to our very first example of substituting water or tea for water. So this one is really simple. You just brew your favorite tea. I like to do a mint tea. And then you add your hot cocoa mix, just stir it up, and then throw in your marshmallows, and you have this wonderfully flavored cocoa.
It's a nice change.
So yeah, it makes this great mint cocoa, or you could use a chai, or your favorite dessert tea, or fruity tea, whatever you want it to.
And this one is a real fun one. We talk about simple syrup sometimes, and this one uses a simple syrup and club soda. A simple syrup is usually 1 cup of water and 1 cup of sugar. But in this case, we're going to brew our tea. You can use a fruit flavor, a hibiscus flavor, just a nut. I mean, any flavor you'd like. Brew your tea, put it in a saucepan with your sugar, and you're going to heat it to just to a low boil and leave it for about 10 minutes. The sugar is going to dissolve and it's going to thicken just a little bit. And you'll see why you need that in a future recipe. But right now you'll just make your syrup, you'll set it aside and you'll let it cool. Once it's cooled, you can make your club soda. So this one
Italian
is
soda.
Italian soda.
You gave it away.
Yeah. Well, you just simply put an ounce and a half of the syrup with the club soda, stir and enjoy.
It's really yummy.
It is.
Our next recipe is called Almondine, and the reason is because it uses almond milk. And then, you remember how I talked about sometimes you pair certain flavors together? Well, if you didn't realize, almonds come from the same family as stone fruits like plums, peaches, apricots. So we chose to use an apricot black tea. And so you just brew the tea, chill it, because obviously if you're making a cold drink, you don't want the tea to be hot. But you pour the tea partway up in a glass. Then you have a separate cup that you put your milk in, your almond milk in, and then you use another one of my favorite tools, this little battery operated hand frother, and you just put that down in the milk, and then you turn it on and it will froth up the milk for you. And then you just pour that slowly into your glass with the tea, and you have this wonderful, like, creamy cold latte.
Right.
Now, on the subject of latte, our next recipe is a hot version, and this one I call the Aloha candy bar latte. And the reason is because I like to use a coconut black tea and put in a little bit of chocolate syrup. So you brew your tea, again, fill your mug a little bit, stir in a little bit of Hershey syrup, and so you can kind of guess which candy bar we're talking about here. And then you steam your milk this time. You heat it up, and then you use that little battery frother again, froth it up, slowly pour it in, scoop the foam on top, and then follow with a little bit more chocolate drizzle on the top. And ooh, it's just yummy.
Yeah, it is really, really good. Now, Marlis and I choose to not drink alcohol, but these next couple of drinks, you can add it and it would be just fine. In this particular case, it's a Gday Mimosa. So we took regular orange juice, and to it we added our Gday berry, which is a strawberry and kiwi fruit blend.
So put the loose tea in and cold steep it.
Right, cold steep it overnight. And you can see it drastically changes the color of the orange juice. So now it's as simple as putting the juice in a glass and topping it with a sparkling cider.
So this makes a wonderful brunch drink. And our next drink, which is our last recipe we're going to share with you, is the Tila Sunrise. This is another great brunch drink. And this one is just so pretty. You use orange juice and pineapple juice in equal parts, or now these days you can actually buy it already blended at the grocery store. But you pour your juice in the glass. Again, like we said on the last couple drinks, you leave it a little short filled. And then you pour your cold simple syrup in. And for this one, we use a flavor called Cabana Beach, which is coconut, pineapple, and hibiscus. So you can see it's this beautiful deep red color. So you pour the syrup in and it will actually sink to the bottom. And so the reason this is called a sunrise is because it's got that beautiful gradiated color like the early morning sun. And so it just looks, it makes such a wonderful presentation. So you share that, and then after everybody oohs and ahs, then you definitely want to stir it.
Otherwise you're going to get a big mouthful of just syrup at the bottom.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so we hope that we've given you a lot of great ideas today for both beverages and a lot of different recipes that you can make. Like I said, everything from main dishes to desserts.
Yep.
And we've got all kinds of recipes on our website, adventureswithtea.com. We've also got other classes we teach, including our Dessert Please class, and just all kinds of fun things. So we hope you have a lot of fun experimenting, and we would love to hear from you. If you drop by our blog, please leave us a comment and let us know what you've made with tea and maybe what you create on your own with tea as well.
What works or what doesn't work, we'd like to know.
Exactly. And hopefully we will see you one of these days in person at one of our classes at Mid-Continent Public Library. So thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.